Is there a silence more terrifying than the one that falls over a crowded room when the laws of reality suddenly shatter? Or a horror more profound than the realization that the safety of the family unit is nothing but a fragile construct waiting to be dissolved by a force that defies all logic and reason? To enter the world of Troll 2 is not merely to watch a film, but to surrender oneself to a fever dream of such intense and bewildering specificity that it forces us to question the very nature of cinematic storytelling, dragging the viewer into a hallucinatory vortex, where the grotesque and the mundane collide with the force of a waking nightmare. From the very first frame, director Claudio Fragasso, operating under the pseudonym Drake, Floyd plunges us into an atmosphere that feels less like a narrative feature and more like a transmission from a parallel dimension, a place where the air is thick with a palpable, sticky dread and the sunlight seems to filter through a prism of madness, casting long, distorted shadows that hint at a rot festering just beneath the surface of the American dream. The film operates on a frequency of high-anxiety surrealism, establishing a tone that is simultaneously hilarious and deeply unsettling. A dissonance that arises not from traditional scares, but from the sheer, unadulterated wrongness of every interaction, every line delivery, and every visual choice. It positions the viewer as an alien observer in a familiar land, stripping away the comfort of genre conventions and replacing them with a chaotic, dreamlogic unpredictability that mimics the sensation of being trapped in a panic attack that refuses to end. We are not safe in the town of Milk. We are intruders, much like the Waits family, suffocated by a hospitality that feels aggressive and a pastoral beauty that masks a predatory hunger, evoking a primal fear of the other that is as ancient as folklore itself, yet rendered here with a plastic, neon-soaked modernity that makes it all the more jarring. The emotional landscape of the film is a barren wasteland of miscommunication and isolation, where characters speak at each other rather than to each other, their words floating in a vacuum of disconnect that mirrors the viewer's own growing sense of alienation. As we journey deeper into this verdant hellscape, the film expertly manipulates our repulsion, using the recurring motif of food, usually a symbol of sustenance and community, and twisting it into a weapon of biological corruption, turning the dinner table into a sacrificial altar where the human body is not butchered, but transformed, liquefied, and consumed in a slow, vegetative horror that feels violating in a way few body horror films managed to achieve. At the epicenter of this swirling chaos stands young Joshua Waits, a character who transcends the typical creepy child trope to become a tragic figure of Cassandra-like proportions, burdened with a terrible knowledge that isolates him from the very people he is desperate to save. Michael Stevenson's portrayal of Joshua is a masterclass in wide-eyed, frantic desperation. He is a boy living in a state of perpetual adrenaline, his psychological layers peeled back to reveal the raw, trembling nerve of a child who realizes that his parents are not the omnipotent protectors they claim to be, but fallible, oblivious fools walking blindly into the mouth of the beast. His internal conflict is the engine of the film's tension, the crushing weight of having to parent his own parents, to subvert their authority in order to preserve their lives, creates a moral dilemma that is both absurd and deeply poignant. He is forced to violate the social contract, peeing on the dinner table, screaming at adults in acts of rebellion that are actually desperate pleas for survival. And the emotional evolution he undergoes, from a passive dreamer to a proactive warrior utilizing the spectral guidance of his deceased grandfather, provides the film with its only true arc of empowerment. Opposite him are his parents, Michael and Diana, who are not merely bad characters but fascinating studies in suburban denial. They embody the willful ignorance of a middle class that believes evil is something that happens elsewhere to other people, and their refusal to acknowledge the encroaching supernatural threat serves as a biting satire of rationalism gone wrong. George Hardy, as the father Michael, delivers a performance that has become legendary, not for its realism, but for its bizarre, stilted sincerity. He wanders through the film with a bewildered grin, a man trying to maintain the facade of a happy family vacation while reality crumbles around him. And his psychological imperviousness to the horror is perhaps the film's most terrifying element. He represents the immovable object of normalcy crashing against the unstoppable force of the irrational. And the friction between his dad joke energy and the goblin carnage creates a unique emotional texture that is both pathetic and endearing. The grandfather Seth exists as a bridge between the living and the dead, a character who defies the rules of mortality to intervene in the physical world. Yet his presence is fraught with a melancholy sadness. He is a guardian angel who can only offer riddles and Molotov cocktails, a memory fighting to stay relevant in a present that has moved on. The relationship between Joshua and Seth is the film's emotional core, a bond forged in the twilight zone of dreams that speaks to the enduring power of legacy and the way we cling to our ancestors when the modern world fails us. On the periphery, the teenage sister Holly and her boyfriend Elliot enact a twisted parody of young romance, their interactions stiff and devoid of genuine heat, turning what should be a subplot of youthful rebellion into a grim commentary on the disposability of adolescence in horror cinema. Their meaningful glances are vacant, their silences filled not with tension but with a confused emptiness that suggests they are already ghosts before the goblins even reach them visually. Troll 2 is an assault on the senses, a kaleidoscope of garish colors and harsh lighting that rejects the moody shadows of traditional horror in favor of a flat, overexposed aesthetic that leaves nowhere to hide. The director's artistic language is one of blunt force. The cinematography often frames characters in awkward close-ups that distort their features, emphasizing the sweat on a brow or the widening of an eye, trapping the viewer in the uncomfortable intimacy of their fear. The color palette is dominated by a sickly, radioactive green, the green of the goblin blood, the green of the toxic frosting, the green of the chlorophyll that consumes the victims, which becomes a visual virus infecting every frame, symbolizing the inversion of nature where the plant life becomes the predator. This use of color is not subtle. It is a screaming alarm, a visual motif that links the disparate elements of the plot into a cohesive nightmare of consumption. The camera movement is erratic, prone to sudden zooms and disorienting pans that mimic the erratic focus of a frightened mind, creating an editing rhythm that is jagged and unpredictable, refusing to let the audience find a comfortable tempo. Sound design plays a crucial, if often overlooked, role in building this unique atmosphere. The film is filled with squelching, wet noises that accompany the goblins' feasting, sounds that are viscerally repulsive and emphasize the organic, slimy nature of the threat. The score, a relentless barrage of synthesizer loops, operates on a level of hypnotic dissonance, alternating between cheesy, upbeat melodies that clash with the on-screen horror and low, droning hums that suggest a machine malfunctioning. This auditory landscape reinforces the feeling of artificiality, reminding us that we are watching a construct, a play put on by man. Yet it also heightens the narrative tension by refusing to provide the emotional cues we expect, leaving us adrift in a sea of ambiguity. The recurring visual motif of the double-decker bologna sandwich, a mundane object elevated to the status of a holy relic, serves as a surreal anchor, a symbol of the junk food civilization fighting back against the militant vegetarianism of the goblins. A thematic clash that is as hilarious as it is strangely philosophical. To evaluate the performances in Troll 2 requires a recalibration of critical standards. One must look past the wooden delivery and the phonetic struggles to see the accidental brilliance of what is being presented. These are not actors inhabiting roles. They are real people trapped in a simulation of a movie and their struggle to make sense of the nonsense. Dialogue creates a layer of reality that is far more compelling than a polished performance could ever be. Deborah Reed, as the villainous Credence Leonore Gielgud, delivers a performance of operatic madness, chewing the scenery with a campy intensity that borders on the sublime. Her wide-eyed manic energy is the perfect counterpoint to the family's dull confusion, and she embodies the film's chaotic spirit with a commitment that is mesmerizing. Her chemistry with the other actors is non-existent, but that is the point. She is a creature from another world, and her interactions with the humans are appropriately jarring and unnatural. The infamous "oh my god" scene is not just a meme. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated despair. A scream into the void that captures the sheer hopelessness of the situation better than any eloquent monologue could. It is acting stripped of all pretense, a raw nerve exposed to the air, and in that moment, the film achieves a kind of transcendent honesty. At its heart, Troll 2 explores themes that are surprisingly universal, albeit buried under layers of latex and green dye. It is a story about the fear of the unknown, the anxiety of displacement, and the breakdown